I'm Catherine Brewer, and I'm going to be talking about the last 7 stanzas of the poem A Bronzeville Mother Loiters in Mississippi. Meanwhile, a Mississippi Mother Burns Bacon by Gwendolyn Brooks. This poem is part of the Bean Eaters series of 1960, and it has to do completely with the murder of Emmett Till. So just as some context, in 1949, a black 14-year-old boy from Chicago spent a summer in Mississippi, and while he was there, he whistled at a white woman, and the white woman's husband killed the son, or not the son, excuse me, the boy, Emmett Till, and when the murderer went to trial, he was completely acquitted, and this poem is from the perspective of the wife, so the woman who was whistled at by Emmett Till. My interpretation of this poem is that it shows the shift in Carolyn Bryant, the wife, her view of her husband, so it shows the shift from her thinking that he was heroic to her thinking that he was a murderer, and therefore shows her shift from racist to less racist. And through this, I found that the theme is that there's always another perspective, and because of this, there is no real easy line between good and bad. So I'll support this through an analysis of the technique of Brooks, especially ambiguity and extended metaphor, and then I'll look at the structure, so the polysyndeton's and asyndeton's that she uses, and the shift before the last 2 stanzas, and finally I'll look at language, so some extremely negatively connoted words, and the choice of the word So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was technique, especially ambiguity. So right here, says he whispered something to her. Did the fine print something about love and night and intention? So in this stanza, the fine print is referring to the husband. So previously, there was a lot of literary storytelling motifs. So the wife was the maid mild, and Emmett Till was the dark villain, and the husband represents the fine prince, so someone who's doing something heroic, who's courageous. And so the line, he whispered something to her, did the fine print something about love and night and intention, is ambiguous because at first it seems like it's about sex, considering that he was holding her by the shoulders, gripped in the claim of his hands. It says, excuse me, but on the second thought, or the second analysis, he whispered something to her, something about love and night and intention could also mean the night that Emmett Till was killed. So something about love could be he killed Emmett Till out of love for his wife. Night would obviously represent the night that he was killed, and intention would represent he killed Emmett Till for his wife, to protect her and defend her honor. And this makes sense within context because previously throughout the poem, it was obvious that it was obvious that Carolyn Bryant was distressed about the court case. So with this line, the fine prince is attempting to convince his wife, Carolyn Bryant, that the killing of Emmett Till was for her and for her honor. The second thing that I want to talk about was the line after that, actually. She heard no hoofbeat of the horse and saw no flash of the shining steel. So this is something that I talked about a little before, but it's an extended metaphor, especially throughout the poem. Brooks creates this metaphor of fairy tales. So she calls Carolyn Bryant the maid mild, so the princess almost, and she calls her husband the fine prince, so someone who is heroic and acting righteously, and she called Emmett Till the dark villain, so someone who's obviously dark-skinned, but also easily the bad person. And this extended metaphor creates that very easily bounded sort of good versus bad of that's so common in fairy tales. But here with the line, she heard no hoofbeat of the horse and saw no flash of the shining steel, it's referring back to the fine prince, of course. And him riding to the rescue and being heroic and good, but the fact that she heard no hoofbeat of the horse and she saw no flash of the shining steel means that she doesn't see him as the fine prince anymore, and whatever he said, something about love and night and intention, trying to convince her that he's not a murderer and that he did it righteously, she doesn't believe it. Oh gosh. So, this is the most obvious sign of her shifting perspective of her husband. The next thing that I want to talk about is Gwendolyn Brooks' structure. So she uses a lot of polysyndeton's and asyndeton's. I'm going to go through them here. So a polysyndeton, one of the most obvious examples is the one that we just talked about. So something about love and night and intention. And the polysyndeton here makes it seem almost untruthful what the fine prince is saying, like he's just listing off things to make Carolyn Bryant feel better. And there's another polysyndeton down here where Carolyn Bryant starts panicking and thinking about the courtroom. It says, the courtroom beer and hate and sweat and drone pushed like a wall against her. Then a sickness heaved within her. So the polysyndeton really adds to the effect of everything pushing like a wall against her and makes everything seems like there's more, like it's filling up the room and there's no room for her, and it creates panic, a panicked tone. The asyndetons are right here. Let's see. That a red ooze was seeping, spreading darkly, thickly, slowly over her white shoulders, her own shoulders. So this was talking about when her husband grabbed her shoulders. And this makes her husband's touch seem sinister and negative and ominous, the lack of the conjunctions here. And it really emphasizes her panic almost. Well, not her panic yet, but makes it sound ominous and sinister, and switches him a little more to not the fine prince, but almost more the dark villain, really. There's also another asyndeton, and it's his mouth wet and red, so very, very, very red. So this just makes him sound very sinister rather than anything else. And there's a shift before the last two stanzas, so the shift is right here. And this stanza, the tone is very panicked, and as you can see, the lines in the sentence structure almost is very long, so it creates almost a sensory overload, like Carolyn Bryant is thinking about the court case and panicking. And then it shifts to very short, very final type of lines and syntax, which creates the shift that you can see in Carolyn Bryant, to where she's panicked and she can't decide what to think of her husband here. And here, she's come to a decision, and she's not panicked anymore. She understands. And she understands that he is a murderer more than a fine prince. So the last thing that I want to talk about is language. There are extremely negatively connoted words, especially referring to the fine prince. So here we can see she felt his hands upon her. So that's sort of an odd way to say that she felt him. He had followed her to the window, which is also ominous. And it says, gripped in the claim of his hands, which is a very, very negative, ominous, threatening way to say he's holding her. And then he pulled her face around to meet his. So that's also very threatening and very menacing. Instead of, he's kissing her, he pulled her face around to meet his. And his mouth was closed over hers, almost suffocating her, like we assume Emmett Till may have been killed. And this shows that Carolyn Bryant doesn't enjoy his touch anymore and feels he is forceful, and it's also shifting her shifting her view once again to seeing him as more of a murderer than a fine prince. And finally, I want to talk about the word own, and that is right here. That a red ooze was seeping, spreading darkly, thickly, slowly, over her white shoulders, her own shoulders. So this word is very important because if you include the word own, what are you referring to that's otherwise? So instead of her own shoulders, she's talking about Emmett Till's shoulders. So if the red ooze was seeping darkly, thickly, slowly over her shoulders, that's one thing. Or over Emmett Till's shoulders, that's one thing. She can almost justify that, is what this is inferring. But if it's spreading over her own shoulders, she knows that he must be a murderer, that to not distinguish between her shoulders and someone else's shoulders that had quote-unquote wronged her. So ultimately, through the use of the technique of extended metaphor and ambiguity, the structure of polysyndetions and asyndetions, and the shift and language with the extremely negatively connoted words and the choice of the word own, we can see that the final interpretation of this poem is that Brooks is trying to show that Carolyn Bryant may actually see her own husband, as a murderer, and that she isn't completely at fault for the murder of Emmett Till. And the theme here would be that there are obviously different perspectives to everything. So Brooks, being a very famous Black poet, to be able to put right in the perspective of someone who is widely hated by the Black community, especially at this time, is really an incredible reach. And to do that, she's showing that there are different perspectives to everything, and that there isn't that good versus bad that is in the fairy tales that she referred to so often.